weapon that the colonial powers have used in the past against our people has always been divide and conquer. America is a colonial power. She has colonized 22 million Afro-Americans by depriving us of first-class citizenship, by depriving us of civil rights, actually by depriving us of human rights. She's not only deprived us of the right to be a citizen, she's deprived us of the right to be a human being, the right to be recognized and respected as men and women. And in this country, a black man can be 50 years old. He's still a boy. I grew up with white people. I was integrated before they invented the word. And I have never met white people yet, if you don't be around them long enough, who won't refer to you as a boy or a gal, no matter how old you are, no matter what school you came out of, no matter what your intellectual or professional level is. In this society, we remain boys. So America's strategy is the same strategy as that which was used by the past, in the past by the colonial powers. Divide and conquer. She plays one Negro leader against the other. She plays one Negro organization against the other. She makes us think that we have different objectives, different goals. As soon as one Negro says something, she runs to this Negro and asks him, what do you think about what he said? Why, anybody can see through that today, except some of the Negro leaders.
Good afternoon. This is Kevin Lewis on The Blueprint. And that audio came from a speech from Malcolm X in 1964, the Black Revolution speech. And of course, today is May the 19th, and today is Malcolm X's birthday. So today, I am very happy with giving a tribute to who I consider one of the greatest black leaders and one of the greatest leaders in our history, El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X. And today's show, hopefully I won't go over. I got a lot to talk about on my brother Malcolm. And hopefully my throat holds up and everything. And I want to thank some of y'all that showed up so far. My cousin Aisha in Buffalo. What's up, E? Tony up there in Buffalo. Southern girl. And Coretta, I appreciate you showing up, sister. Like I said, today's show is dedicated to my brother Malcolm X. Today is Malcolm X Day to me. So I've been doing things to commemorate my brother for a couple of years now. I remember we having a extravaganza weekend about 4 years ago. Time has flown. Where we had speakers come in. Sheikh from Morocco came in on a Sunday. We had a public speaking on that Friday to start the weekend off. And on that Saturday, we had a community unity. We called it Unity in the Community for Malcolm X Day. And on that day, we had free everything, food, drinks, things for the kids, snow cones, popcorn, moonwalks, all kind of things for the kids. But we wanted the community to get together and celebrate who they call our Black Prince. And to me, he's no prince, because a prince, to me, demeans him to saying that he's not yet a king. And of course, we do have our Martin Luther King Day. And to me, Malcolm is king as far as I'm concerned. But let's talk about Malcolm X. And if y'all have any comments, I appreciate them, or any interaction. And that first dialogue that we gave from Malcolm X, like I said, that came from the 1964 Black Revolution speech that he gave. And I'm going to be playing excerpts throughout the show from Brother Malcolm. And what I like about Malcolm, and this is who Malcolm is to me, and what Malcolm meant to me, and from my perspective. And I would appreciate if y'all would comment on what Malcolm, that's my question, y'all. What does Malcolm mean to you? Whenever you hear the name Malcolm X, what do you think of? And it's no right or wrong, because this is your perspective and how you feel. And start off, of course, Malcolm was born in 1925 on this date, May the 19th, in Omaha, Nebraska. To the parents, Earl Little and Louise Norton Little, his mother. And his parents was Garveyites. And what Garveyites was, you know, you had the teachings of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. They called people that followed those teaching Garveyites. And his dad was a minister. And reportedly, he was murdered or thought to be murdered by the Ku Klux Klan from his teachings. And so Malcolm grew up without his dad, basically. And also his mother was believed to go insane. So Malcolm was moved to Harlem, New York, and was in the foster home program. And he was a troubled teen at that time. I don't believe he didn't finish high school. And he was convicted at the age of about 20 years old. He was in 1946, 20 years old, 21 years old. He was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison for larceny and breaking and entering. And anyone who knows the story of Malcolm X or seen a movie that Spike Lee did of Malcolm, he was a street thug, street criminal. And to me, what he was and what he became shows me that sometimes we condemn our youth, you know, when they're still young. And we'll say, well, that person's not going to amount to anything. And what Malcolm was proof to me is that anyone can change their life around drastically, not just say, well, I made a change. I used to steal and I don't steal no more. I mean, drastically. Some of these people that we paint off as being street thugs and street criminals can actually be leaders of our nation. And that's what Malcolm also meant to me. And he's a lot of examples of a lot of things to me. And Coretta says she loves Malcolm X, and a lot of us have an affinity for Malcolm X. I appreciate the comment. And Isha says she thinks of by any means necessary. And yes, many of us, that's how we're introduced to Malcolm. Martin had a dream, and Malcolm was by any means. Martin was the peaceful person, and Malcolm was the violent hate monger, as they would put it. But those are pictures that's painted by somebody else. And that's why I'm interested in what Malcolm means to people, what it means to you. What does it mean to you when you hear Malcolm X? And I'd like to thank Dee Dee for joining also. So like I said, Malcolm grew up in a foster home. He was sentenced to prison. And in prison, I'm going to go briefly because his history, I will go back to some of the things that his history and his background, but it's not that relevant to me as far as me going into each detail. He was in prison, and that's when he was converted to the Nation of Islam under the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And he learned a lot. Malcolm, I believe, he said he read the dictionary. Big on reading. He became big on reading. And through the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he became Malcolm X. And when he was paroled in 1952, he became a leader, a main speaker in the Nation of Islam. And anyone who knows Malcolm, Malcolm was fiery. Malcolm, he had a charisma. He was charismatic, and he didn't pull any punches, except for when he was talking to his people, about our condition. And I was talking to a brother yesterday, and I went to a seminar, a speaking, and it was a very nice presentation that from a brother, a doctor, and I have his book, but Dr. Runoko, I'm sorry. But me and a brother was talking afterwards. A brother that, you know, a lot of us was the same, you know. Well, the thing is, a lot of people that showed up there and we were networking, brothers, like I may not have known this one brother, but this other brother that I do know was telling me, man, you need to meet this brother. I know both of y'all, and y'all get along, man. Y'all, you know, I was like, okay, yeah. So after the presentation and the signing, we was out in the parking lot, me and this brother that this other brother that we knew said that we need to talk. We just end up talking a couple of hours in the parking lot because we started, you know, vibing, you know, we talking about Malcolm a lot. We were just talking in general. We didn't come there to talk about, but, you know, Malcolm came up. And what we were talking about is how, you know, he had an affinity for Malcolm. And I was like saying, yeah, man, Malcolm this. And I remember Malcolm said this, we quoting and we going through things. And one of the things I was like, one thing that I told him that I loved about Malcolm is brother was sharp, and he was blunt, you know, to play with words. He was sharp and he was blunt. But he also knew how to deal with us. You know, he wasn't condescending when he spoke to us because that brother was very intelligent. He read a lot of books, always reading, but he was very intelligent, but he also understood the conditions that our people were in and what we were going through and why we were where we were at. And a lot of times what we do, we gain a certain discipline, whether we go to school and become some kind of psychologist or sociologist or, you know, get some kind of title in these universities. And then we turn back when we're talking to our people, we're condescending, you know, these Negroes or y'all Negroes this or y'all, you know, blah, blah, blah. And Malcolm wasn't like that. Malcolm had reached a stature where he could talk to us and not offend us. He could talk to us about us and how we are and not be offensive to us. And that's a very unique trait. You got to have compassion. He had compassion for his people. He was passionate and he also had compassion. And that's what I was telling the brother that I admired about Malcolm, because he had a stature. He was very intelligent, but when he spoke to us, he was trying to explain to us and he understood why we were doing the things that we were doing. And a lot of us need to learn that, because what we do, we attack our youth, you know, with veracity. We attack them. Look at you dressing like this, or listen to how you talking and listen to what you're doing and blah, blah, blah. And instead of having compassion and understanding why they may be doing the things that they're doing or where they're at. And if you have that compassion, then they may tend to listen to you more. And some of us as parents, we need to change how we approach each other and how we approach our kids. And this is one of the things that I loved and I learned about Malcolm, dealing with Malcolm. And I was listening to Tony. She said he was a leader, and I guess I'm right. He changed the Black nation along with Martin Luther King, and he was a different man. That's what made Malcolm unique, and that's true. And one of the things, if we go into his background, Malcolm didn't go to college and all these things like this, so he wasn't taught by the system, you know, in this systemic racist system. He wasn't a product of that. Many of our leaders were a product of that to a certain extent. So the system had a great influence on them. So that was one thing that was unique about Malcolm. And I'm going to get into some of the things of why different people have different relations with Malcolm, or they could relate to Malcolm in different ways, that in a lot of our other leaders, we don't relate to them in that form of fashion. We appreciate them, but we can't relate, you know, and that's a different thing. But going back into Malcolm, and I'm going to play another excerpt from Malcolm. And this comes from that 1964 speech.
The civil rights struggle has failed to produce concrete results because it has kept us barking up the wrong tree. It has made us put the cart ahead of the horse. We must have human rights before we can secure civil rights. We must be respected as humans before we can be recognized as citizens. Among the so-called Negroes in this country, as a rule, the civil rights groups, or those who believe in civil rights, they spend most of their time trying to prove that they are Americans. Their thinking is usually domestic, confined to the boundaries of America. and they always look upon themselves as a minority. When they look upon themselves on the American stage is a white stage. So a black man standing on that stage in America automatically is in the minority. He's the underdog, and in his struggle, he always uses an approach that's a begging, hat-in-hand, compromise approach. Whereas the other segment or faction in America, known as the nationalists, black nationalists, are more interested in human rights than they are in civil rights. And they place more stress on human rights than they do in civil rights. The difference between the thinking and the scope of the Negroes who are involved in the human rights struggle and those in the civil rights struggle, those so-called Negroes involved in the human rights struggle don't look upon themselves as Americans. They look upon themselves as a part of dark mankind. They see the whole struggle not within the confines of the American stage, but they look upon the struggle on the world stage. And in the world context, they see that the dark man outnumbers the white man. On the world stage, the white man is just a microscopic minority. So in this country, you find two different types of Afro-Americans. The type who looks upon himself as the minority and you as the majority, because his scope is limited to the American scene. Then you have the type who looks upon himself as part of the majority and you as part of a microscopic minority. And this one uses a different approach in trying to struggle for his rights. He doesn't dare. He doesn't thank you for what you give him, because you're only giving him what he should have had 100 years ago. He doesn't think you're doing him any favors.
That's my brother. And I learned a lot from that aspect. When people say, well, Malcolm X, and Tony said something while I was about to play the speech. He said Malcolm had a huge impact on human rights, and that is very true. And before I even played that, I saw that she said that. And the thing about it's very important to distinguish civil rights and human rights. You know, Martin Luther King was a civil rights leader. He was talking about our civil rights in this country, which you go to the powers of your oppressor and you want to be treated as a civilian. And today we still not treated as first-class American citizens, and it's all throughout the news is a slap in the face, and it's showing us that we still, we talk about integration. I believe one of the segments I'm gonna play also from Malcolm when he's talking about integration. But one of the things that the difference between human rights is, you know, it's not so much of them hiring you or integration or what's legal, because there's laws in America that said, you know, they got the Civil Rights Bill. Now, you know, all these things with the Supreme Court was passing, but they were not implemented. And they're still not implemented. And the thing that I talk to people about when we talk about our issues today, it's not that they're not treating us legally correct. They don't even see us as humans. To me, it's inhumane, some of the treatment that has happened to the black and brown people in this country. You know, when you're talking about lynching people for things where they didn't commit a crime, and you're talking about aiming a gun at a kid and shooting a kid with a BB gun, you know, that's inhumane. Or when you talk about a man punching a woman in the face repeatedly, if he was on a regular person, we'll say that's inhumane. And we see that, and this is what's so profound, because we see that when these football players have issues, or these college football players, they show videos of them striking some girl. Sometimes it's a white girl or something like that. She may push him and the guy hauls off and hit her, and they want him, you know, basically castrated. They want his whole career to be over with. He's still a young man, you know, younger than Malcolm was when Malcolm went to prison. He's 19 years old and stuff like that. And they don't want him to ever, you know, be able to play a game again and everything like that. This is how America treats them. Or we see these NFL players, they're doing something, they're hitting a woman, but we see cops doing the same thing. We see a white cop beating up a black woman on the side of a highway in America. It's not appalled. You know, they're not, you know, it's not like, oh my God, I can't believe he did this. He's an animal. You know, it's like, well, what did she do? Well, maybe she should have did something differently. You know, even a guy, I believe last month, that was in Dallas, the bouncer that started punching the lady like she was a man, you know, the black lady. And even once somebody said, well, man, she pushed him first. Well, he slapped her phone out of her hand because she was going to call 911. And then, I mean, he had his pistol pulled out. And then after that, he saw she didn't have a gun, and then he slapped her. She pushed him for slapping her phone out. I mean, if somebody walked by me, much as these cell phones cost, and you crack my screen and you bump me, and I'm be like, yo, you know, that, let alone somebody knocking my phone out my hand, you know, that's some money, you know what I'm saying? So then she pushed him. That was a reaction. That was a reaction thing. And then he just went in all in on her, fist balled up, going all in on her. And my point is, yeah, it was bad, but it wasn't like, you know, America wasn't, you know, like America didn't lose her mind with that. That's what I'm getting at. America, it wasn't, the reaction wasn't the same. And that's because we are not seen as human. You know, we're still seen as subhuman because it's in no society, no humane society, is it all right for a man to be striking a woman with his fist. You know, that's inhumane to me. It's inhumane for any person. I ain't talking about just law enforcement, but any person to point a weapon at a child and pull the trigger. You know, even people, when you go to war and you're at war, that's seen as inhumane. You may be at war with those people, but if you see a 12-year-old kid and your first reaction is to pull the trigger, you know, with no compassion at all, you know, that tells a lot. That's inhumane. But this happens constantly here in this country, and even today. And I'm talking about today, 2019. And I'm not talking about back in the 50s. I mean, it was probably a lot worse. I mean, it was accepted a lot more, but it's still accepted. That's what Malcolm was fighting for. He's not, you know, the hell with your civil rights. I want to be treated like a human first. If you treat me like a human, you're not going to, that's, you know, you're going to have compassion as a human being. Every human has his respect. Now, when you talk about civil, that's, you know, within the law, you know, okay, well, you can't hire me, or, you know, you can't not hire me because I'm my sex or my religious background or my skin color or my age. That's civil. That's the laws. But when you're talking about human rights, that's what he was talking about. See me as a human, you know. And he's not only talking about in America. This is another thing about Malcolm. He was talking because human rights, like he just said in that excerpt, human rights is birth-given rights, not of any country or nation or state. That's something that everybody has, human rights. You're born a human, you should be seen as a human. And it strikes me as odd. The first humans on this planet is the ones that's being treated least like humans. You know, we're treated inhumanely by the rest of the world, basically. I mean, China doesn't treat the Africans as human, you know. You go to Europe, they don't treat us as humans, you know. A lot of places around the world, they don't treat us as humans. And I just read something that was posted on my memory about the Aborigines in Australia. And I think it was in 1964 or something like that, that they passed a law act saying that they weren't even humans, the Aborigines, the original Australian people, the black people of Australia that matriculated from Africa. The Europeans came there and said they passed a law that said, you know, they're not even human. And of course, in this country, we was 3/5 human, something like that, you know. So that's subhuman, and they still treat us as subhuman, and many of us don't even understand that. So we'll sit here and shake our head at what's happening, but you're looking at a people that don't really see you as human. So I ask people all the time, they say, well, did you see this, or did you see this? Like, well, do that surprise you? I mean, why are you surprised? I'm not surprised. I know where I'm at. You know, I know where I'm at, and I know our history in this country, and I didn't think that things had changed. So my thing is like, yeah, why are you surprised? That's what I'm surprised at, that you surprised at what's happening. And things have got to change. I'm gonna read a couple of comments from cousin Wayne. I appreciate you showing up, bro. He said Malcolm was right. Until we start supporting one, we should not go seeking help from the white man. And that's an interesting comment. And it is. He was basically, and that's another contradiction, because they want, you hear the conservative with, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. That's the American way. But then when you talk about that, then they want to condemn you. They called him a hate monger. And we'll hear speeches and excerpts also where he's talking about that. And I'm gonna play another part. I mean, really, I listen to Malcolm all day. I drive around in my car listening to Malcolm, but
to stand up here and tell you that the Afro-Americans, the black people who live in these communities under these conditions, are ready and willing to continue to sit around non-violently and patiently and peacefully, looking for some goodwill to change the conditions that exist. No, and you are out of your mind if you think that our people, it's easy for you to live in another neighborhood and be sympathetic to the cause, and then come in with some nonviolent tactics and think that we too will think that that's sufficient. But if you had to live under those conditions and suffer what our people suffer, you would have gotten rid of that nonviolence a long time ago. And
okay. And I kind of chuckled at that. I mean, that's also a shot at Martin that he was taking, with the nonviolence and stuff. Because of course, what Malcolm was talking about violence, and it's a TV interview. I think he's with a sociology student or a teacher's assistant that they had on at UC at Berkeley in a library interview. And the guy was asking him about the violence. As a brother. That was asking him about the violent aspect that people tagged him with. And he was saying, the violence that he's talking about. He said, I'm gonna violently fight for my life. He said, you calling me violent is just like somebody trying to lynch somebody, and the person that's being lynched is fighting not to be lynched, to get the rope. He said, and then you calling that person that's fighting violent. He said, I'm talking about defending themselves. He was saying, like, I'm not going out. He said, at that time he was still in the nation. He was like, the Nation of Islam don't teach violence. They haven't bombed one church. They haven't lynched not one person. They haven't shot or anything, anybody in this country. But yet they're being labeled as violence. And he was saying he's teaching you to defend yourself against somebody trying to hurt you, and doing it by any means necessary. And part of that I'm gonna get into. It's interesting because the dynamics of what was happening in the country. If Malcolm had made a comment about that, well, they would try to, as soon as you say something, they'd go get another black person and try to critique what you're saying. Let that person critique what you're saying. So it's not really me critiquing you. It's another black person. And we've seen that with Kaepernick. As soon as Kaepernick did what he did or took his stance, then they want to go ask other black players, so what you think? So what you think? And the black people, the black players that's like, well, yeah, I'm with him. Or I think those weren't the ones that they wanted to put in the forefront. The ones that they want to put on the forefront is anybody who was opposed. And anybody related. I mean, Ali, Ali was dead and gone, but they got one of his ex-wives to say something, and they posted her all over. And I ain't never heard of that. I'm an Ali, I like Ali, and I hadn't even heard of whichever wife this was. I hadn't heard anything from her about anything in the last 20 years. I probably didn't even hear anything about her 20 years ago, because she was just somebody's wife. But she said something against Kaepernick, and all of a sudden it's posted all over the radio, all on, the media. They running with it, or whoever, Shaq. Oh, you know what, Shaq, come on, Good Morning America. Say what you said the other day about Kaepernick. Jerry Rice, they looking for another black person, because it's not just if one of them say it, it's no, one of y'all are saying. And I saw a quote that Malcolm said that they will hire another black person to kill a black person just to say a black person killed them, and that's very interesting. And but also I like to thank Jazz, my niece, for showing up also. And reading the comment, Tony said, we still being judged by the color of our skin, not by being human. And Jasmine says, self-defense as a black person is seen as violence in today's world. And that's true. And that's Malcolm actually said that in a lot of speeches. He said all around the world. And I'm going to play something that it's kind of funny that he said, but he said only black people are taught, you know, when somebody's attacking you, not to get emotional, to you know, go by these peaceful steps. So all around the world, you know, anybody else in a European nation, they get attacked and people are like, yeah, well, you got a right to defend yourself. Even this country was you know, they fight, the NRA, they fight for people to have guns and your right to bear arms and all this stuff like that. But when it's us, you know, we get attacked, you know, you need to be, you know, calm down, you know, whoa, Kevin, calm down. I'm quite sure he didn't mean it. I mean, yeah, he punched you in the face, but, you know, calm down. And that's how they treat us. And I thought it was kind of funny. But, you know, and I'm going to tell y'all something else. Our parents, you know, it's like what happens is a dichotomy of our leadership and our people who follow. We like to split Malcolm and Martin up. And the crazy part is some of these older people that was following Martin, because of course they act as if you can't believe in Martin and Malcolm at the same time, and actually you can. You could believe in whoever you want as many ways as you want. I could believe in Marcus Garvey teaching, I could believe in W.E.B. Du Bois teaching, I could believe in Booker T's philosophy, I could believe in Douglas, I could believe in what Martin was doing and why he was doing it and how he was doing it, and I could also believe in Malcolm, and I could say, well, you know, I believe in both of them. I don't have to be anti. And that's another thing I'm hoping that I play today when Malcolm was saying that, you know, we don't have to be anti anybody else. It's like, it doesn't matter what religions. If we divide ourselves on those principles of, you know what, I don't believe in this religion, so I can't follow you, or I can't believe in your philosophy on this and that. And that's something that that was very profound that he said about that. And but the crazy thing that I was saying, I got myself off track, was that when our parents, and many of us growing up in the hood, I'm talking about hood, y'all, you know, you come home, somebody trying to bully you or jump on you, your parents don't act like Martin. They don't be telling you, well, turn the other cheek. You know, somebody say, man, they hit you, you better not, you better hit them back. We don't, you know, we are. I'm thinking of my parents saying things like that. You know, they don't be telling you to turn no other cheek. You know, you can't play that in the hood. But those are the same, the elderly people, you know, they got that from somewhere, but they be acting like, you know, like I guess they bought into that paradigm that Malcolm was teaching hatred. And what y'all gonna see also on here, that they did put other black athletes, pit them against, and Jackie Robinson was one. And when I started researching, I kind of lost a lot of respect for Jackie. For the things that he was saying about Muhammad Ali, about Malcolm X, and but it's a good documentary. If you look up Jackie Robinson versus Malcolm X, you're gonna see what I'm talking about. And they kind of used that brother, and he didn't realize that he was being used. And this is what I like also about Malcolm: when they brought people on, other black people, to talk about him, he understood what was happening, and he wouldn't attack that person, because he understand that person was being used, and he also understood that person didn't understand that they were being used. You know, so that was another thing that I liked about my brother, and hopefully I'll be able to play something that he said. But I'm going to another excerpt of listening to my brother Malcolm X on Malcolm X's birthday, y'all.
That will terrify you. And if you don't think, you have blind yourself to the historic development of everything that's taking place on this earth today. You'll see other things. Why will you see them? Because as soon as people realize that it's impossible for a chicken to produce a duck egg, even though they both belong to the same family of fowl, so-called fowl, a chicken just doesn't have it within its system to produce a duck egg. It can't do it. It can only produce according to what that particular system was constructed to produce. The system of this country cannot produce freedom for an Afro-American. It is impossible for this system, this economic system, this political system, this social system, this system, period. It is impossible for it, as it stands, to produce freedom right now for the black man in this country. It's impossible. And if ever a chicken did produce a duck egg, I'm quite sure you'd say that it was certainly a revolutionary.
All right. And of course, what he's talking about is the system. Where America was built not for us. America was built to oppress us, and the system is built to oppress us. That's why it's so hard for us to make waves in the system. Now, we have been making small progress, but a lot of things that the progress that we're given is the progress is things that we should have been born with. You know, okay, the Emancipation Proclamation, they freed the slaves, but we shouldn't have never been slaves. You know, we were happy. We're celebrating our freedom. We were born free, and every person is born free or should have been born free. So it's like, okay, you kidnap somebody. You kidnap this woman. You kidnap this child. And after a while, you say, you know what? Okay, I'm going to let you go. Yeah, they're going to be happy you let them go, but they shouldn't celebrate you for giving them their freedom. You're the captive. You're the one that kidnapped them. You know, I shouldn't have been here in the first place. You know, I'm happy to get out of here, and I'm not going to celebrate. I'm not going to act like you did me a favor. I mean, I might give that praise to somebody else. I might give that praise to God I pray to the Lord or whatever. Say, thank you, Lord, for you know, releasing me. But I'm not going to sit there and act like you did me a favor. You the one that put me in this peril. You know, like Malcolm said, you stabbed me. You put a knife 12 inches in my back, and then you pull it out 3 inches, and I'm supposed to be happy. You shouldn't have never been stabbing me anyway. And then when you pull it all the way out, I'm not supposed to be happy because I got scars. I got wounds that you inflicted. So I'm not going to be happy for you. You know, I'd like to say peace and salam alaikum, Ramadan Mubarak to my brother Mustafa Ali. Thank you for showing up, brother. And so that's what I was getting at with Malcolm. So I'm gonna get into like I was talking about Malcolm, and he's talking about the system. The chicken can't produce a duck egg, and that duck egg that he's talking about, that duck is the analogy of our freedom or anything for us. You know, the system is what it is, and this is why it's so hard for us to make progress, meaningful progress in the system. We talk about integration, and I don't call it integrate. I mean, integration is it's misconstrued because, yeah, you can be integrated or tolerated, but long as you're integrated within the confines of the system, we're not as an equal. That's the thing. See, you're not an equal to me. You could be here. You could work at this job as my servant. You could work here, or you could exist here, coexist here, but you got to be subservient to us. And like people say, well, I'm not racist. I have black friends. Yeah, okay, but do you see me as your equal? You know, that's what my point is. I don't care whether you want to see me as a friend or not. I don't want to be your friend. I care less. I pick out my own friends. But my thing is, am I equal? You know, you see me as equal ground. Your friends that you're talking about that you have, do you see them as being your equal? You know, do you want, can you see yourself, me being your supervisor, you know, without an issue with that? You know, when we talk about integration, and yeah, you could go where you want to go, but you're still not seen as everyone else seen. See, that's different from equality. The difference between being integrated and being equal to somebody is two totally different things. And that's one thing that I also want to bring up. And that's what he was talking about, the system. The system wasn't made for us to be equal. So it's not going to produce any equality. And we're still like us, like Tony said, still today, we're not equal. She said exactly, Black people, we own the land at the beginning. Slaves made the way. And I appreciate the comments. Now, the thing about Malcolm also, like anybody, anytime I talk about Malcolm to anybody, or Malcolm is brought up at a barbecue or picnic, when I go back up in Buffalo, I remember me and my cousin Phil, Phil will say something, and, my uncle, we'll all be talking at a barbecue, and it's like, he'll say something about Malcolm X. And my man will say, man, Malcolm this and blah, blah, blah. And it's like he's coming from a different perspective. You have some people that's down with the nation, or some people that's not down with the nation, or some people that's down with Martin and not down with Malcolm. It's a lot of dynamics. Whenever you bring up Malcolm, that's a strong conversation. But the thing is, a lot of people can relate. And what I was talking about a little earlier, a lot of us can relate to Malcolm on different levels. And the reason that was is if you look at Malcolm's life, he ended up leaving the Nation of Islam. He left the Nation of Islam in 1964. He made his pilgrimage. He made his Hajj to Mecca. And he converted to Sunni Islam. And he came back. He started, you could see the maturation in Malcolm from when he first got out of prison, parole, to when he came back to America. Now, Malcolm also was someone that wasn't restricted to this American border. He was international. So a lot of Pan-African people, Pan-Africanism, they can relate to Malcolm. He was universal. He wasn't just talking about our issues here in America. If you ever listen to his speeches, he'd talk about something happening in another African country or over there in a Mid-Eastern country or South Asian country, and he'd talk about the politics and the government and what was going on. He was very versed at what was happening around the world with people of color. And, that was a difference. That's a big difference to me. He always talked about Africa. He talked about our history. And he was even doing that when he was in the Nation, because I think Alex Haley, who wrote Roots, and ended up writing Malcolm X's, the book on Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I think that's a book that every household should have, every household in America should have. And I ain't just talking about Black people. I'm talking about brown people, Black people, white people, people of all backgrounds. And, Alex Haley said that, man, him and Elijah Muhammad taught him a whole lot about his roots. And that's what inspired him to go back and search his roots, because they was telling him things that he didn't know about Africa and about pre-slavery. And that inspired him to write Roots. And, that's what Malcolm was. I mean, at different facets of his life, he was, a lot to a lot of people. So Pan-African people can relate to Malcolm. He was big in about learning your history, or who you were before we came here. And I sat in on a seminar yesterday from the doctor and Rashidi, and it was he has a book that's called The Global Journeys in Search of African Presence. And this brother here, he, in fact, I'm gonna show y'all his book. You go look this brother up. Hope y'all can see that. But this brother, he lived here in San Antonio. He said, I think for 12 years. This brother had been to, countries. I mean, he's been to a whole lot of countries. I don't even know the exact number. Probably like 57 countries or something like that. But he's been all over, and he knew Ivan Van Sertima. He knew Anthony Browder. He called him Tony. Dr. Ben, John Henrik Clark. I mean, he got pictures with all these people. This brother's, historian, philanthropist. And he actually does trips. He takes groups to Africa. And me and my daughter were just looking at the package that he has. Like, if you want to go, you know, you pay so much money and you're going to go to Egypt and you go to Sudan. And I think it's like 3 weeks. If you just want to go to Egypt, it's a two-week stay and things like this. But this brother, I was just listening to him lecture yesterday. But also in there, he could talk about Malcolm, you know, because that's something that Malcolm could relate to. And that's something that a lot of unless you're talking about Garvey, and at a stage, you know, W.E.B. Du Bois changed because he was on that talented 10th stuff when earlier in his prominence. And then as he matured, he changed. But also what happened with Malcolm, he also changed. You could see his maturation from the time that he was an early speaker in the Nation of Islam. Then you look at him when he's starting to look at the 60s, the early 60s, and then he made his pilgrimage, his Hajj. He changed his name. You could see the maturation. Even his dealings with Dr. King changed. You know, he understood things from a different perspective. Both of them were changing. And a lot of people can identify with Malcolm at different levels. And reason being, if you're in the nation, you know, Malcolm made that popular, along with Muhammad Ali, but Malcolm to a higher extent, because Malcolm was a mouthpiece, and the nation didn't really have a mouthpiece like that. You know, they have Farrakhan now, but back then they didn't have a mouthpiece like that, an orator. And Malcolm was a extraordinary speaker, a fiery speaker. And I think he brought the nation to a different level at that time. And so people that was in the nation can relate. Then some of us that's Orthodox Muslim, we can relate because Malcolm also became an Orthodox Muslim. Those who was in the civil rights movement can relate to Malcolm. Those who are being oppressed in different countries can relate to Malcolm. What Dr. Rashidi was talking about yesterday, like when he went to Cuba, he actually they got a plaque for Martin Luther King. And he said when he first went there, there was people asking, did you see the one for Malcolm X? And he was like, nah, I didn't see it. And he said he went back there again, and he was looking all over for it. And he was like, nah. Then he said his last time he went to Cuba, the third time he found it, but it was right on the other side of Martin Luther King plaque. So they got him back to back, but he's looking at it for a different place. But other countries, they appreciate Malcolm. And if you ever read his book or you listen to his speeches and teachings, you'll appreciate, women can appreciate Malcolm. You know, when he talk about the black woman being the most disrespected and unprotected person in the world, you know, and that's because of the black man, basically, because we don't protect our women. And we look at a lot of the issues that's happening in our society today, you can still relate that, because like what Malcolm was saying, a lot of the things that he's saying back in 1962, 63, 64, still relevant and pertinent today. When you talk about police brutality and how the media treats police brutality here, the media will fool you in having you think that black people are just criminals. 99% of black people are criminals, and the police got to do what they got to do. That's what he was talking about back then, and that's still relevant today, and that's still pertinent today. And a lot of our issues that we are dealing with and trying to articulate, if we look at what some of the things that Malcolm was saying, that's still pertinent. And I was listening, like I said before, about Smokey Robinson talking about he not African, don't call me African anything. You know, he has nothing to do with Africa, but what you're doing, you're cutting off the roots. You have a rich root. You know, you're cutting off your roots to that tree. Those roots run deep. And, you know, so I guess you just American. You think you believe you're an American, and just because of your celebrity, people don't understand. And a lot of these people today don't understand. But a lot of ways that people can relate, let me get back into that, is like Malcolm grew up without his father. A lot of us grow up, you know, in the black community without our parent, without our father. He ended up growing up without both parents. You know, so if you just say, well, my dad wasn't there when I was growing up, but you look at what Malcolm did. So what excuse do you have not to raise up a people, but to just raise yourself up? You know, if you look at what he did without both of his parents, you know, now it did take him to go to prison. Some people say, well, I've been to prison and it's hard. It's this and that. And they can't pull themselves up anymore. Well, you know what? Malcolm been to prison. You should be able to relate to that. So why would you use prison as a crutch? And unlike Malcolm, Martin Luther King, you know, who was this brilliant young kid, you know, went to college at 16 or something like that. And, you know, Malcolm was self-educated and very respected. And this is one thing that I'm going to get to a comment from Teresa after I make this comment. Malcolm was self-educated. You know, he didn't go, I mean, he didn't even get a high school diploma. But Malcolm spoke at UC Berkeley on an interview. One of the interviews that I was talking about earlier with the sociology student. And Malcolm was invited there to speak. Malcolm spoke at Oxford in December '64. Malcolm spoke at Harvard. Now we're talking about elite universities, places of education. He spoke at Harvard in March of '64. You know, you don't just go there and say, I ain't talking about he stood outside the gate with a bullhorn and gave a speech. I'm talking about he was invited to speak to them, to their students. You know, that's respect. That's a lot of respect. So when you're talking about you educated yourself, and then they want to hear what you got to say. One of their elite, they're elitists. You know, the ideology in America is they're elitists. They're white supremacy. But one of their white PWIs, primary white institutions, one of their or two of their main primary white institutions want you to come speak there, and you don't even have any letters to your name. The only letter you got on your name is X. You're not a PhD, a doctor, or anything. But they're giving you that respect. And Teresa said she loved his comment about the Black community being the most policed and how could we still have the most crime. And yeah, that's a great speech. And that's if you look at his speech about police killings and police brutality, he says a lot of that. That you have more police, but he also was saying America is a police state, and we throw that around now. It's a police state. He said Harlem is a police state for us, for Black people, for minorities. It's a police state, and if you understand what a police state is, it's like they ruling you that you occupied. You don't have the rights that everybody else have, and they enforcing it with the police. They're enforcing it, and they enforcing those things upon us. And now we talk about a police state, and how do you go about combating that? But another thing about relating, I mean, with Malcolm, different people. So if you've been a convict, you can relate to Malcolm. You could say, man, this brother was a convict and he did something. See, like with somebody else, like say Jesse Jackson or so-and-so, it's like, you know, when you go try to talk to people and you've been to where they were at, so he could talk to him and say, yeah, man, I know how it is. I know what you're talking about, you know, but then you look at where he came from and where he got to, you know, people that's high school dropouts. And it's like, man, I'm behind the 8 ball of this, and this. But you know what? Malcolm was a high school dropout. And look where he went. From the North and the South. You know, being that brother that was born in the South, you know, all that North and South stuff, that didn't mean nothing. You say, well, Malcolm was from here, Malcolm was from there. Or, you know, it's like he was transcending all of those boundaries. And he didn't condescend people when he talked to them, you know, and that's a great thing. So anybody at any state, if we look at Mike Brown, and they say, well, Mike Brown was a thug. I say, well, you know, Malcolm Little was a thug too, and look what he became. So when you want to put these youth down for what they're doing at that time, you know, their whole life can turn around, not only to lead themselves, but be a leader to their people. He knew about politics. You know, he could express himself about politics, not just American politics, but politics that was happening in Vietnam, politics that was happening in Algeria, you know, politics that was happening in Cuba, politics that was happening, you know, around the world. You know, he was well rehearsed on all those things. Even talking to us, he was well rehearsed. And when then also, well, first let me play this. Let me play this right quick. I'm gonna play this and hopefully that'll lead into what I'm saying.
Representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who is the spiritual head of the fastest growing group, religious group of black people here in the Western Hemisphere. When we give our views, we don't give them as a civic group, we don't give them as a political group, but we give them primarily as a religious group. And any solution that we support, we absolutely feel that it's a religious solution rather than a political solution. One of the reasons that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in teaching us here in America, is giving us a solution that differs drastically from the sit-in movement. He's trying to make us men. Now, the very fact that you find students all over the world today are standing up for their rights and fighting for their rights. But here in America, the so-called Negro students have allowed themselves to be maneuvered under a tag of sit-in. Actually, I guess it describes it. The name describes its nature. It's a passive thing. And if their goal is integration, it's not a worthwhile one. But if their goal is freedom, justice, and equality, then that's a worthwhile goal. If integration is going to give the black people in America complete freedom, complete justice, and complete equality, then it's a worthwhile goal. The holding this integration bottle and dangling it in front of the Negroes in America today has actually disabled them, or it has nullified their ability to stand up and fight like a man for something that is theirs by right, rather than to just sit around and beg and wait for the white man to make up his mind that they're worthy to have this type thing. I think that this is, in my opinion, why we disagree with the sit-in movement. If they are willing to wait for another 100 years for the white man to change his mind to accept them as a human being, then they're wrong. But if they're willing to lay down their life tonight or in the morning in order that we can have what is ours by right tonight or in the morning, then it's a good movement. But as long as they're willing to wait for the white man to make up his mind that they are qualified to be respected as human beings, then I'm afraid that all of their waiting and their planning is for naught. As Thurgood Marshall said on New Year's Eve, the Supreme Court brought about the desegregation decision, I think 6 or 7 years ago, and there is only 6% desegregation in America right now. We don't call two students, black students going to the University of Georgia integration, nor do we call 4 children, black children going to school in New Orleans integration, nor do we call a handful of black students going to school in Little Rock integration. If every black man in the state of Arkansas can't go to any school he wants, that's not integration. And if every black child in the state of Louisiana cannot go to any school that they are qualified for in the morning, then that's not integration. And likewise with Georgia and any other state in America. It's no integration with us until the entire thing is laid on the table, not 100 years from now, but in the morning. And at the rate that the NAACP, CORE, and the Urban League is willing to accept the change of attitude in the white man's mind, we who are Muslims feel we'll be sitting around here in America for another 1,000 years, not waiting for civil rights or something like that, but even waiting to be granted the rights of a human being.
And that was from my brother Malcolm. And that speech right there was in 1963. And that was it's an interesting video because that's his debate with James Baldwin. And that was quite interesting. And also in this speech what he had with James Baldwin spoke after him about that. And there's a part in there that I really like. I'm going to play it after a while. But where James Baldwin was talking about, you know, he don't want to be seen as being black. He don't want to be seen as being, he want to be seen as you know, like almost like saying a colorblind world. And I like Malcolm's response to that. but I'm going to play that in a little bit. But that's part of what Malcolm was like. He seemed more calm on that commentary right there, but he was actually talking to James Baldwin. And another thing, like he said, they'll pit another black leader against us. And when he understood that was happening, this also happened with Jackie Robinson. And if you look up Jackie Robinson, like I said, versus Malcolm X, what happened with Jackie Robinson, of course, he was the person that integrated baseball, Major League Baseball. But Jackie Robinson was part of attack on Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. And they used Jackie for that purpose. And PBS did a series on that, Jackie Robinson's, when he got out of baseball. And what was happening, Jackie Robinson started being seen differently in the late 60s or mid 60s with Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali and Jim Brown, the leaders, the black leaders and sports figures that became popular were more so militant. They were seeing that things weren't changing the way they wanted them to change, and they would start seeing things from a different aspect. What Jackie Robinson did, he went against Malcolm, and he was talking about Malcolm was an angry black man and all this violence, and he'll never follow anything that's talking about violence. And what it is that he let the media tag Malcolm, and a lot of us have done that also. We let them say, well, Malcolm was about violence. And if you listen, and that's relegating Malcolm to just, a phrase. And Malcolm was much more than that. Malcolm was much more than that. And the violence that they're talking about is defend yourself. Like I was speaking about earlier. They're just basically saying defend yourself. It's hard for you to say, well, you know what? I'm trying to fight for human rights and also got to fight somebody to stop from lynching you or from raping you. Just because they feel like they had a power to do that. You're sitting up here trying to fight to say that I should be able to sit at this restaurant, or I should be able to walk down the street. And at the same time, you're not even, man, I wish I could remember the lady's name, but it was like a show that they had. I did a show on it last year, but where she was, she was basically raped by like 5 young teenagers, white teenagers, the sister. She was a mother of a young child. And basically they got away with it because that's how things were. They would never convict even white kids of raping a black woman because that wasn't, that's not something that they did, and but if you can't even fight that, it's like, so if they're going to try to do something to you or lynch you because you're walking in the wrong neighborhood or finding yourself in the wrong place and they need excitement or something to do and they think they want to lynch you or rape you, then you should be able to fight for your life. That's a basic human, that's nature. Every animal should fight for their life. Should have a right to fight for their life, let alone human. If we're talking animals, everything fights for his life. And, that was the jacket they put on him, saying, because I will fight by any means necessary for my right to live. Then all of a sudden I'm violent. That was the jacket they put on him. Jackie Robinson was using that. They used that jacket and it was denouncing him and saying, I never back anything that's talking about violence. Well, he's not talking about violence. He's talking about self-defense. But then Jackie Robinson also went on a crusade in the paper, speaking out against, of course, Jackie Robinson played for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and Malcolm X was up there in Harlem a lot speaking. And he went on a campaign against Malcolm for the media. And of course, they paraded that, the great Jackie Robinson, puts Malcolm, in his place and Malcolm came back and released a statement against Jackie. And then Jackie also came out against Muhammad Ali, calling him a draft dodger. And he said that also that Muhammad Ali, when Muhammad Ali wouldn't go to Vietnam, he was saying like, he's not showing appreciation for what America has done for him. Speaking on Ali, for what this country has done for him, allowing him to make a living. Like somebody should allow you. Who the hell is America to allow a human to make a living, unless they were into suppressing humans from making a living? That's what I'm saying about we're celebrating rights that we should normally have. And that's what Robinson was saying. He was like, you know, Muhammad Ali should have went. Like, this country, you know, they're affording him to make a living. Like, bro, they afford everybody to make a living, you know, and that doesn't mean, you know, so what started happening with the Black Panther Party started coming out. Yeah, H. Rap Brown and all them people, they start talking out against Jackie Robinson. They start seeing him as more so as a sellout, that somebody that was part of the system, that Negro that didn't even understand who he was, and they were using some of us to pit themselves against some of us. Like, the same thing happens today. Is sometimes, even if you don't agree with what I'm saying, don't speak about it to them. Pull me to the side and say, Kev, well, you know, well, I heard you say this, and I don't understand why you would say that, as opposed to going and taking a jab at me, and put yourself up to take a jab at me, you know. And I'm talking on a minimal stage of like social media, and I'm just wanting to personalize it. But if I have a problem with something that somebody is saying, I might ask you, well, why you say that? Well, brother, I just don't believe that. But to do a campaign, and some of us do that, like he talk about organizations doing that, you know, because if we all want freedom, whether you're talking about through integration or separation, or is through using praying to Allah or praying to Jesus or whatever, if you want freedom, the means that you want that freedom shouldn't even matter. You know, why am I fighting you if you try to jump out the window and I'm going to go through the front door? If whatever we're trying to do to get out of the situation that we're in, why am I fighting you? I should be just trying to fight to do what I need to do to get where I need to go. And I'm not going to fight you over that, you know, basically. But in this speech that I played an excerpt from, it's him versus James Baldwin, but it's not in an aggravated sense. Now, also, what happened, I'm going to play this last part, and I know I'm going over right already, but hey. But what happened was James Baldwin spoke, and James Baldwin was talking about he just want to be seen as a human. He just want to be seen as basically a man, a colorblind world where black and white. He was like, long as you have black and you have white, then it's going to be this contradiction. It's going to be who has the upper hand. And Malcolm's response is what I'm going to play.
Well, I, as a black man, and proud of being a black man.
Whoa, we got buffering going on. That's not supposed to be happening. But man, anyway, what he was saying like, okay, as a black man, why is it that black people always got to be the ones to basically, unless you're proud, if you're not proud of yourself, you know, you're the ones that give up who you are. You taking that subservient role.
Well, I, as a black man, and proud of being a black man, I can't conceive of myself as having any desire whatsoever to lose my identity. I wouldn't want to live in a world where none of my kind existed. And I do think that the Negro, American so-called Negro, is the only person on earth who would be willing to lose his identity in what you might call a new product. I heard one fellow say one day that there eventually intermarriage and intermixing would take place on such a vast scale that it would produce a chocolate-colored race. And Martin Luther King was in a televised discussion, with a white newspaper man. I saw it on the television a couple months ago. And this white newspaper man put this to him. He pointed out that he's proud of his white race. He's proud of what he is. He's proud of his racial characteristics to the extent where he has no desire to lose it by mixing with any other race. And the thing that he said he couldn't understand was why the so-called Negroes don't have the same racial pride that whites have in trying to retain their characteristics. And Martin Luther King never answered him, although he should have answered him. I think that it is disastrous for the black people in America to reach the point where their racial pride disappears, and they don't care whether their blood is mixed up with someone else's. I think that also one of the things that brings this about, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us, the very fact that you have to refer to the black man in America as a Negro shows you that right there something is wrong. An African doesn't accept this term Negro, and you find they teach us in the educational system of this country that Negro is a Spanish word that's supposed to mean black. Yet when you find the black people who live in Spanish-speaking countries of South and Central America, they don't accept the word Negro to identify themselves. No one allows himself to be classified under the word Negro, but the black man here in America who is a descendant of the slaves. And very seldom is it ever applied to anybody but the black man here in America who is the descendant of the slaves. When you ask a man his identity, he should use a word that connects him with a culture. If you ask him his nationality, it should connect him with a nation. Like if I ask a man his nationality and he says German, that connects him with Germany. Or if he says, even if he says German American, it still connects him with having originated. His family, his history has originated in Germany. If he says he's French American, it connects him with France. But when you ask the black man in America and he tells you Negro, he doesn't put any other he doesn't put any other country up front in front. He puts American Negro, or he'll just say Negro. This doesn't identify him. And usually when you find a man who calls himself a Negro, he can't tell you what language that he spoke before he came to this country. It's of no consequence, no interest. He believes that prior to coming here, he was a savage in the jungle, and therefore he had no language. And this justifies his lack of knowledge concerning that mother tongue today. And the history, as Mr. Baldwin pointed out, of the white man here in America and the black man here in America points up the fact that the Negro, or the man here who calls himself a Negro, is just an ex-slave. If he is an ex-slave, I'd rather say he's still a slave. But he's wearing his slave master's name, the name that was...
All right. Now my brother Malcolm, referring to that thing about a colorblind, when people say, you know, they want a colorblind world, or, you know, people mixing, and before you know it, it'll be no black and white and things like that. You should be proud of who you are, especially where you come from. And when I heard Smokey Robinson talk about he has no connection with Africa, this is what that was coming to mind. And I was getting into a debate on one of these groups that was supposed to be pro-black groups. And I'm like, you know, how could you accept that? You know, and this is just, I'm not going to bash Smokey. I'm just saying he don't understand. And this is somebody that's not reading or learning and doesn't have that pride in yourself. When you have your pride in being American, and if you have your pride in somebody that doesn't even appreciate you as a human, that tells me where you're at. You know, I'm saying I'm proud to be who I am, but also because I know who I am. I know that who I am is my legacy. You know, who I am is you know, where my roots come from. So part of my being proud is because I understand who I am and where I come from and what I've been through. You know, a lot of us, when we talk about when we come from rough neighborhoods, we're claim that, you know, hey, I came from Harlem. Hey, man, I'm from Brooklyn. Hey, I'm from Watts. You know, hey, I'm from, you know, West Chi-Town, you know, whatever you calling out. Hey, I'm from the East Side, San Antonio. You know, because you know what it took to make it out of those places, or you know what, so people can understand where you're coming from, what you've been through. And being a black person in America and still being here, and still striving and thriving and fighting the struggle. They say the struggle is real. When they understand that they know that I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and I know who I am and I know what I've been through, then, you know, we still wear that as a badge. Me and my brother always say, you know, coming up on that east side of Saytown was rough. And what we've been through. And sometimes we see somebody and it's like, man, it's good to see somebody that made it out. And not only make it out that's just like existing, but surviving and striving and doing good for themselves. And that's what it is when you say that, you know, understand that where you came from. You're part of people that was kidnapped and brought here and went through all kind of hell while they were here, and still going through hell while we're here. So I look at the conditioning that's going on. And when I look at my people here, I understand why we're not where other people are at, because nobody's been attacked like we have been attacked. You know, I understand that, yeah, you may have it better than I have it right now because you haven't been through what I've been through right now. So when I'm trying to talk to our youth about the things, and even when I was talking about when I got in a conversation with my cousin up there in New York, and he was talking about black people wouldn't be able to do this if we had our own country in the fold. So, brother, you don't understand what we've been through. What you're looking at is not the totality of who we are and where we've been. That anybody else that rode in that seat with us, where we sat, that road would have rode in our place, they would have folded. They wouldn't be here. You know, we got some of the strongest women ever. We have the strongest women in the world to go through what they've been through and still be the beacons of our people. We should be proud of our black women. We should be proud of our black mothers to go through the hell that black men has put them through. And not only our black men has put them through, but the people in this country has put them through. The people around the world, what they put them through. And they still holding it together, and they still raising single kids. And we should be proud to be a black man, you know, from what we've been through in this country. And you shouldn't be taking a subservient attitude to say, well, could you please give me this? Or could I get a little freedom, boss? Or you know, we have to start standing up. We have to start standing up for our family. We have to start standing up for our women more. Because I'm not going to say that we just don't, but we need to do it more. And it's against us to do it more. They set out obstacles so that it'll be harder for you to do it more. And some of us are accepting those things. Some of our women are accepting those things. But they don't understand the conditioning that we've been through to put us where we're at. And yet we're here. Yet we rise. Yet we strive. And I'm sorry I'm over the show, y'all. But this is about my man Malcolm, man. Malcolm X Day. They have a couple of places, I believe, in California and in Illinois. You know, they tried to have a Malcolm Day, and I celebrate my brother Malcolm on this day. And if this was on a Monday, I probably wouldn't go to work. If it was on a Friday, I probably wouldn't go to work, and I wouldn't take the day off. I'd call in because it should be a day off, and it should be a day that we celebrate as black people, because this was actually one of our true leaders, and I hold him in high regards. And I'd like to thank y'all for showing up. And this is Kevin Lewis on the Blueprint.
To him during slavery, he's speaking the language of the man who made him a slave, because he has no knowledge of his own tongue. He only knows the history, his own history, as taught to him by his former slave master, who purposely hid from him his own history to make him think that he was an inferior being before being brought here. And Mr. Muhammad teaches us that until the black man here in America is connected or reestablished or given some knowledge of his existence prior to coming here to America, his own appraisal of himself will be so low that he'll actually think that the white man is doing him a favor to let him be here in America, no matter what his status is. And he also, and this is one of the reasons today why he fights so hard, some of them, to sit down next to the white man. They actually think that the white man is the personification of perfection, and whenever they're allowed to go live in his neighborhood or sit in his restaurant or mingle or socialize with him, that they have attained, that they have made progress. But when they go back and study the history of their own people and the accomplishments of their own people, the civilizations and cultures, black civilizations and black cultures that existed in Africa at a time when the whites in Europe were living a cave-like existence, then immediately their appraisal of themselves begins to go higher. And they don't think that to beg somebody to mingle with them in this country is any kind of progress whatsoever. And I would like to say one more thing too on that nonviolent thing.